It's lovely to see so many people in one room, and you're subconsciously trying to find the unmute button, aren't you, with so many kind of Teams calls. But yeah, I mean, my session today is about communicating the vision and the role of media and communications in reducing smoking. And it's really struck me this morning how many presentations have referenced campaigns, you know, from Clunk Click and Twinkle Twinkle. And, you know, as humans, we remember campaigns. We laugh about the bad ones, but we remember the good ones, and they stay with us over time. So I'm going to cover the evidence for mass media campaigns. I'm going to share with you some of the audience insight and the challenges this throws up. I'm going to share with you, hot off the press, drumroll, evaluation of our most recent Fresh Smoking Survivors campaign with Sue and with Kathy. And then share with you finally some of the latest public opinion figures around where the North East public stands on this vision to make smoking a thing of the past. I'm obviously going to be talking a lot about what campaigns are, but firstly, I think a declaration, really important, what campaigns are not. As said previously, they're not silver bullets, they're not magic wands, they're not a panacea to cure all the ills in terms of public health or ending smoking tomorrow at all. But what they are, they're a really potent tool to create social norms and belief, to change them, to shape them, to reverse them. And nobody knew this better than the tobacco industry in building those kind of norms up, you know, with the power of addiction, obviously, but building those norms up right from scratch. So we had more doctors smoking Camels than any other cigarette, and the low-tar marketing. I know from Sue and Kathy talking about sort of low-tar cigarettes. You know, those campaigns around low-tar, they were there to reassure an increasingly worried public around the risk of smoking. Virginia Slims associating smoking with femininity, just as the Marlboro Man had, you know, the association with glamour, with femininity, with slimness. Superheroes bursting out of Marlboro lorries. I mean, that, you know, that's a kids' film, essentially, in the late 70s. That lorry was made especially for the Superman 2 film. You know, again, those link-ups with major studios, great brand exposure. And then ones I remember from the 90s, you know, we referenced when smoking was banned on TV ads. So what did the tobacco industry do? They went on the billboards. I remember those. Just every street corner, it seemed, we had Red John smoking, that kind of bloke in the pub wisdom, the Lambert and Butler ads, and just, you know, it was almost like you couldn't move for them. And then I think one of the most blatant and cynical attempts to reach out to young people we've ever seen, and even more horrifyingly in some ways, so recently, the Maybe Marlboro campaign. From Germany, you know, linking smoking with, you know, what do those messages give you? You know, it's rebellion, it's glamour, it's independence, it's, you know, it's the association that the tobacco industry wants to build in young minds. So we might raise our eyebrows and laugh a little bit when we hear about influencers, you know, and what people are doing with their phones. I certainly wouldn't with my boys. But guess what? Big Tobacco was there first. And this is an advert from R.J. Reynolds back in 1935, which I spotted and I want to share with you. It was a campaign that they ran around linking up with debutantes coming out into society, and the fact that they just love their cigarettes. It was among the many distinguished women who find Camels mild and refreshing. So this is Beatrice Gray, known as Milo. She's an ice skater, and she's a typical member of the modern-minded younger generation. You can imagine the voice. But at the parties this winter, you know, she notices that people prefer that delicate Camel flavour. So back in 1935, there's an influencer, you know, talking about smoking. And then you move forward the clock to 2018, and this is an expose in the New York Times, which sort of tied shady deals from the tobacco company to influencers paid to put out pictures of smoking, certain colours, certain hashtags like red is here, decide tonight, you know, all sort of creating that impression that people who you want to be like smoke. And obviously we see the impact on the statistics, you know, 8 million people killed by smoking since the 70s, which we heard this morning. Lung cancer now, diagnosis outnumbering, you know, men among females, because of that impact, among more women taking up smoking in the 60s and the 70s. And then, you know, Cancer Research UK, tobacco kills one person every 5 minutes. And then obviously people in our communities, people like Kathy and Claire, who were diagnosed with lung cancer before the age of 50. So I guess the campaigns, and again, you know, we remember them, you know, they're a countermeasure. Interestingly, when these campaigns first started airing, the Stop Smoking campaign started airing, I think it was in the 60s in America, the tobacco industry, they were so effective that the tobacco industry offered to take its own campaigns off air, which they did, and then the ad budgets, you know, big tobacco went down, great for them, and people started smoking, you know, more. So these campaigns do work. And you may remember, so we're working with so many colleagues in the room over, you know, best part of 2 decades, really. You may remember a lot of them, you know, our Every Breath campaign around COPD and smoking. 1 in 2, don't be the one. Maggie, who we saw earlier, Tony from Middlesbrough, 16 cancers, second-hand smokers, poison. So this is really important, and bear with me because it is going to be a bit wordy, but it's a global summary of how campaigns run around the world. And this evidence is really consistent from country to country that really, you know, good campaigns are effective. And you might remember some of these campaigns yourself. We've got the mutation campaign from Public Health England, tips from former smokers from America, you know, real stories of real people. The fatty cigarette advert from British Heart Foundation. Smokers still talk about that today. You know, they really do as a benchmark of a good campaign. HSE from Ireland, Jerry's story, and then the 16 Cancers campaign, which originated in Australia, and then we ran in the Northeast. So the evidence tells us that campaigns are an important part of efforts to help reduce adult and youth smoking. But gaining enough reach and intensity, enough people seeing it is really important. They operate like a spring. You know, when they're on, it increases that motivation to quit. It increases actions. When they're off, that subsides. Awareness, you know, we're often, you know, challenged around, well, why are you on TV? Isn't it about TikTok these days? Well, TV is still the best channel by far to reach the largest number of smokers, and especially the smokers who are in, you know, poorer communities. We'll hear a little bit more about that in a bit. But, you know, other channels like catch-up TV, radio, digital are becoming more important, and it is important to diversify. Also, television carries more believability, credibility, cut-through. You know, we're seeing levels of doubt now from digital media where, you know, people aren't quite sure, you know, what the truth is these days. Campaigns like Stoptober, positive calls to action, really, really important part of the journey, but the strongest evidence has always been and still is campaigns focusing graphically, emotionally on the negative consequences of smoking. And there's some really good evidence coming out of the Northwest now that that's especially effective for higher dependency smokers. But it's not just around, you know, smokers, it's also young people. It's the preventative measure as well, disgust towards smoking, what it can do, and anger at the tobacco industry. That's also really important for people with lower levels of health literacy, which is something we always evaluate. Campaigns, and I know this is some of the evidence that Robert shared with me before, it's not just about generating quits, it's also they can improve quit success rates. You know, we see that on Facebook, that people, it's a reminder of why people quit in the first place. It's post-product evaluation. It affirms it as a good decision. News and social media. We've just had BBC Look North in filming this conference and the vision to make smoking history, which is fantastic. And it's still, although vaping is sometimes challenging for the headlines these days, there's still really strong media interest in smoking. You know, it raises the importance of the issue and support for action. And this is something where I think colleagues who've worked with Fresh a long time will know we say this. The biggest impact is focusing on adults. You know, it's the changing social norms of the adult world which then filter down to young people. You know, we know from campaigns that are focused just on youth alone, often by the tobacco industry, they've been poorly appraised. Robert, you will forgive me for I always nick this slide from you. But, you know, as Robert spelled out before, there's a lot of really good behavioural science that underpins campaigns, but they also do something really simple. They're a reminder, they're a trigger. You know, they maintain feelings of concern, they offer people hope, and they signpost effective measures of stopping. And you know, just in the same way as a word from a doctor, you know, a concerned child saying, "Mum, Dad, I wish you'd stop smoking." You know, seeing a loved one with a smoking-related illness, or even just a personal health scare. So I'm just going to share with you some of the insight that we've developed. And this is a bit of a summary of over the years, but especially with regard to what we've gained recently. So we do know there's high motivation to quit and a desire that among people that they never started. Doesn't always translate into a quit attempt, but it's a really, really, really important start. We know about half of smokers are either trying to quit or cut down. And I think cutting down as we go forward is something we really need to grasp and seize and look at the challenges and the opportunities around that. With regards to vaping, we know from recent surveys that vapers are twice as likely to really want to quit or be in the process of trying to cut down. We also hear about the accidental quit of the person who started vaping, never meant to quit, but they end up doing so, cutting down and just accidentally, and before they almost know it, they're not smoking anymore. Age makes a difference. Younger smokers, there's a perceived window of safety. For older smokers, fear it's too late. We know Health, family, cost underpins most quitting thoughts. We know the cost of living crisis has fueled stress and anxiety, and that's something really important because quitting to improve mental health, although it's evidence-based, it's proven, it doesn't feel believable, it's counterintuitive. How will I cope without the thing that sort of gets me through? And we know that motivation to quit can really fluctuate. It can fluctuate. It's not linear. It can fluctuate by the day, the week, the month. And that's why we need to be on as much as possible, getting those reminders in front of people when, seizing when the moment is right. Harm and hope comes across a lot in national insight from Public Health England, now OHID, and it's something that we find, coming up time and time again. And you'll hear these terms, and I think it's two sides of the coin in terms of campaigns. So, we know health is the main factor for most smokers who want to quit. That increases with age, feelings of vulnerability. But we also know that some smokers do employ techniques to try and minimize the personal health risks. And there's an unrealistic level of optimism in terms of the chances of smoking catching up with you. We hear terms like could get hit by a bus. We hear terms like, everything gives you cancer. And they are things that we need to challenge. We know there's low awareness of the degree of risk and range of illness. There's twice now we've run surveys looking at kind of where the risk is almost on a line. 8 out of 10 underestimate that 1 in 2 risk of dying early from smoking. In fact, we know now the risks are more like 2 in 3. But between 1 in 10 and 1 in 20 think the risk is somewhere between, so about half believe the risk to be somewhere between 1 in 10 and 1 in 20, which just shows the reframing that we need to do. In terms of hope, we know many smokers have tried, failed numerous times. Failure itself is a barrier to trying again. We talk about self-efficacy, but that also extends not just to doubt whether I can quit or somebody can quit, but actually whether support itself can help. So we do need to make quitting desirable, believable, can be done, but also recognising something that really Sue told us about, and I think it's really interesting, that a completely smoke-free future, something you might want to do, but it can also feel scary in itself as well. So I'm going to comment on how we've used this insight with our smoking campaign, Smoking Survivors campaign, which is the campaign we launched in the summer. And it's the story of people who've been affected by smoking, but also in many ways the story of our region. It's about the harm of smoking, life, health, family, finances, but also the hope, people who've taken, despite the illnesses, they've taken their lives back. We ran a really heavyweight launch burst in June, mainly across telly, video on demand, radio, Facebook, billboards, some really lovely examples there of sort of bringing live streets, but we're not Lambert and Butler, but Sue and Kathy, which was fabulous, and a shorter burst in September, just as a sort of prior to Stoptober, with a positive call to action of putting smoking behind you and making a fresh quit. So this is hot off the press, and I am going to speed up now. But most people remembered the campaign. Most smokers saw or heard it. 73%, most with live TV. High levels of finding it easy to understand. High levels making people wish they didn't smoke. In fact, only 1 in 4 didn't experience that desire. High levels of concern, motivation to quit by the benefits. Really strong agreement that having real local people featured, which was brilliant. And also really good levels of awareness impact across kind of all the areas that we cover, which was great to see. Triggered feelings of sadness. People found it easy to imagine the situation, increasing motivation to quit. Could happen to me, didn't want to die and leave my family, stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't just local people, it was also the fact that it was people who people say are middle age, and of course you're young people, but not middle age. But it wasn't challenging the assumption that it only catches up when you're older. I would ask you not to take photographs and share these because these are people's names, but we see this on social media time and time again with campaigns. You can see how it plays out. People's quitting thoughts, also their frustrations. Sharing their stories, even tagging their friends, wish you could quit, really important sort of mobilizing communities. But I think this is a real lesson for us, actually. I think we need to take this on board and not be too scared by it as well. Some people will push back, not everybody wants to smoke. There is a group of smokers who don't want to quit, and they will tell you that. And you see it, propaganda, BS, people get lung cancer, and those things do come up, and that is, in some ways, that is our job, just to take that on board. But remember that most people are open to those messages. I love this quote from Clive Bates, that the real public isn't like the bland, smiley types you see in NRT adverts. Public health is a gritty business. Did it move actions? Yes, it did. And I do this with a huge pinch of salt. I really do. It's a survey of about 800 smokers. But you can see by those numbers, we might not be able to accurately say if it was a sample of 20,000, it was 15% or 11%, but it shows that we're driving actions at scale, and that churn of intentions and what campaigns can achieve at population level. You know, we know quits fail, motivation fades, and back to that spring effect, but you know, we see this time and time with campaigns. They do drive action at population level. Just rounding up now, lots of news coverage, obviously the media, huge interest in Cathy and Sue, but also the aspiration to make smoking history. You know, we see this from a lot of our you know, people who back our campaigns. They go from advising people to quit smoking then to becoming absolute champions, marching on Downing Street with Cancer Research UK, which is just so inspiring. And I think not surprisingly, because of all this noise, and also because actually, you know, so many people this morning telling of how they've lost somebody to smoking as well. You know, the North East time and time again sees the highest support for the measures to cut smoking and make smoking history. You know, the 5% target, a levy, a license for businesses, protection from the tobacco industry, even smoking banned on beaches. You know, the public is with us. So just really quickly to conclusions, you know, we are delivering awareness and actions at scale, and I think you can see that in a lot of the figures we've seen this morning. But there's no such thing as one message which works with everybody, which is why we have to rotate. Our role is to engage, not always to chase likes. You know, likability is not always the same as effectiveness, but the public is with us. It's about challenging ambivalence around smoking, you know, making every generation, not just current smokers, aware of the risks, not job done. And it's offering hope and a better future smoke-free. And you know, back to real stories. They are a story of the region and of the people who are trying to help and support and motivate. And you know, it's about culture change, and it's about reframing the culture of smoking. And you know, that's one of the ways we'll get there. Thank you.